The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Good day. Hope you're doing well wherever you are joining us today. Welcome to Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Calvin Sauls, and it is a joy for you to join us today. As you know, here at Faith Without Borders, we seek to engage in thought-provoking and solutions-driven conversation as we look at some of the issues that we are facing both here in Los Angeles, around the country, and indeed around the world. And today is no exception. Because today we're going to be looking at the topic, Fight to Save Lives from Flavored Tobacco in the City of Los Angeles. Yes, if you didn't know, there's a big fight going on, not just in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, but around the country as big tobacco has reinvented itself by way of flavored tobacco. And we are right now seeing the impact of it on adults, but especially on our young people. And so this is of grave concern to us. And so we wanted to gather some folk who are working on this very important issue to just come together and to see how we can have an informed conversation about it as we prepare ourselves for what needs to happen right here in the city of Los Angeles. We know that currently there is an ordinance that's been explored by the city attorney by way of the health committee of the city council. And several of us were there this past week to give testimony as to why we need this ban. And it was a very, very powerful experience where we had a multi-generational, a multi-racial, as well as a multi-religious contingent there to come together to make sure that the health committee of the city council know why it is essential, it is critical to make sure that we save the lives of our children, families from this huge challenge, called flavored tobacco. You may have seen several segments on several of our networks, but I know especially ABC has just done a phenomenal job of almost every other day on one of its shows, especially Good Morning America. They've done a lot of segments, around flavored tobacco, around vaping. And so this is a very, very urgent matter for us. It is about health and wellness. It is about misinformation that's been put out there. And so we wanted to see how we can engage in education and mobilization around this challenge of flavored tobacco, and it's all about saving lives. And today, it is a joy for me to have some friends and colleagues with me right here in the studio, and some will join us via Skype and phone so that we can have a conversation around this. And so in the studio with me, it is a joy for me to welcome Latia Suttle, who is a member of Community Coalition. Glad to have her here. We work together on several campaigns at Community Coalition, and just appreciate her commitment and her passion for the work of how we can uplift, South Los Angeles and continue to see how it can be a viable community for vitality. And then we have the lead organizer from Community Coalition here, Carlos Leon. He's a friend and a brother in the struggle, and so good to have the two of you here. And then I believe we have on Skype Carol McGruder. We're going to see if we can bring Carol in. Carol McGruder is joining us from the Bay Area, and we're glad that she's able to join us. Well, while our engineers working to bring her on, why don't we start with Carlos? I've been involved with Community Coalition for several years now. It's one of the organizations that is close to my heart. and we've done a lot of work together. And but just by way of introduction, for some individuals who don't know anything about Community Coalition, just kind of give us some brief introductory words about Community Coalition.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us, for having this space. Everyone, it's important to have a platform nowadays to talk to each other. For those that are yet to know about COCO, or Community Coalition, in South LA, cocosouthla.org. You can look us up. Being brief is hard because there's been so much now, and we're celebrating 30 years next year. And so that just shows you how much work there's been. And I started there when I was 16, so I was a youth. So I have a lot that I can say from there to now. But briefly, I can say that we started in the late 80s, early 90s, during the crack cocaine epidemic. Our honorable Congresswoman Karen Bass, an amazing leader that paved the way to create a space where we could be having conversations like right now on what's happening, but more than that, having conversations about the context. Why did it start with the crack cocaine epidemic? How can we stop it? And what else can we do to really uplift the Black lives and the Latinos that were there, and to really create consciousness on why South LA had been looking at being targeted. And so since then, we've been looking at different campaigns, different efforts to push back on a lot of the direct attacks that we've seen through policies, lack of education, lack of support, streets, management, you name it. We've been directly attacked for over 30, 40 years now. And so we're currently and constantly looking at different ways where we can listen to our community, do more education, do creative ways to fight back. Whether it's with alliances and moving forward. We want to put a stance type of environment. We can't wait. We have to be proactive, and that's who COCO is.
Yeah, and COCO is all about people.
Power.
It's all about power.
And
it's all about progress. That's what it's about. And so glad to be a part of that. I think we have Carol McGruder that's joining us via Skype. We're grateful that Carol is able to join us. She is the co-chair for the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. And Carol, are you there to join us?
I am here. Can you hear me?
All right, there she is. Carol, we're so glad that you're able to join us. Thanks so much for, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us. I don't know about you, but we here in Los Angeles are cold. We are freezing, even though it's just drizzling. And we just have some wind over here, but it's a little crazy. But Carol, thanks so much for joining us. I'm so glad that this issue is bringing us back together again. I know we've been together, working together in the Bay Area since about 1996, 1997. So I'm so glad to be able to reconnect with you. We've been working against big tobacco for a long time. And
a long time.
So
I felt like God put you down there in Los Angeles because he knew I was going to be needing you.
Well, listen, I'm not the only one here. We got some powerful folk, working here, some committed folk, and we'll hear from, Ed Sanders, later on. And so it's just great to be reconnected around this issue. As always, big tobacco has always looked for ways to reinvent itself. And so it has done so by way of, flavored tobacco. So, Cal, why don't you tell us a little bit about, the organization that you are part of, and it is a statewide organization.
I'm the co-chair of the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. We are now 11 years old, and I'm happy to be here with Karen Bass's organization because she has been our champion and actually was able to come and celebrate with us in the Bay Area when we had our 10-year birthday gala last December. So our organization, we're statewide, but we've been on the national front to get Newports, to fire Newport cigarettes as the co-star of the Black community's lives and everybody else who lives with us. Newports and other mentholated tobacco products were given away free in our communities to children as young as 9 years old. And the youngest person that we know of is actually Dave Chappelle. I heard him give an interview, and he was given free cigarettes when he was 14 years old at the Metro DC station there. And he was a very sweet, young-looking boy at the age of 14 and said he went home and practiced learning how to smoke. And we know that he's a very big smoker. And so that's the example of some of the things that we're fighting. But tobacco is such a deep conversation for African Americans. Yesterday, we opened an exhibit in San Francisco at the Public Library, just documenting our 400-year relationship with tobacco and slavery, since that's how the reason that enslaved Africans were brought initially to the United States wasn't for cotton, but was for tobacco. And so this country was really the beginning foundations of it were built on enslaved Africans and cultivating tobacco and selling it all over the world. And that was the beginning of the commercialization of the sacred tobacco that Native Americans or First Nation people use. And our entry point into these great United States of America. So it's a deep conversation, and I love to be, where we have enough time to really talk about some of these things. But that's, where we are. So we are trying to stop the number one killer of Black people. This product kills 45,000 Black people every year in this country. That's from direct smoking. So in the past 20 years, we have lost about 1 million Black people to smoking. So we consider that to be an emergency. And everybody needs to be working towards how we're going to deal with that. And the way that we're not going to deal with it is to keep giving people the product.
Yes, and making excuses for this product not to be banned or not to be dealt with in terms of how it's just impacting and affecting the lives of everybody, but especially Black people. And we're glad that you're on, because we're going to look at an aspect of the ban that specifically connects with African Americans, especially as it relates to mental. So we'll get to that as part of our conversation this afternoon. We want to why don't we just stay with this, Carol? I know you've worked with several organizations around dealing with flavored tobacco. I know San Francisco has a ban. That's the one I'm aware of in Northern California. But here in Southern California, we know Culver City, has one, and several other cities around Los Angeles. We know that LA County has one. So before we zoom in on the LA one, can you maybe tell us a little bit about the ban that the San Francisco City and County.
When we talk about banning menthol, we're talking about banning the sale of mentholated tobacco products. So people could still legally possess it, and people want to compare this to prohibition with alcohol. But it's not illegal to smoke the product, to have the product, to use the product. But what we're doing is when you're working on a product that kills people, you need to work on multiple ends. So we're working on the supply side to get it out of our community. But there are also many things that are happening on the demand side. Mm-hmm. So we're not just cutting people off of these addictive products and there's nothing there, but we're gearing up with the health departments all over the state to provide services for particularly for menthol and flavored tobacco smokers. Our people have a lot of stress. We have a lot of different issues of why we're smoking. Mm-hmm. And so part of this tax money that we have coming down the pipeline now is to address those issues. So it's not about just taking this product away and not realizing that people are really addicted. I have many smokers in my family, and I have lived with people who have died from smoking and wanted to keep smoking until they were dying, till their dying day. So I know what a powerful addiction it is. So we have had some tremendous leadership in California. As you said, in San Francisco, we have and since you know the city, out of District 10, which is where I grew up, which is Baby Hunters Point, which is one of the Black communities in San Francisco. We had initially Malia Cohen, who came in and did a total ban on all flavored tobacco products citywide. So that includes all the vaping products that our children are now becoming addicted to, and Newport cigarettes. And so this was historic. The tobacco industry came in right away, and they put a referendum on the ballot, collected signatures, and almost 70% of San Francisco voters voted to keep that sales ban in place. And then we didn't think it could get any better than that. We had Shimon Walton, a young brother, dynamic, from District 10, as Malia moved up to the Board of Equalization. And he banned e-cigarettes until they are reviewed by the FDA. So many people don't realize that these products have just been allowed to proliferate while our federal government it's just been inertia. E-cigarettes are banned in Japan. There are different countries that just from the very beginning, they were banned. So San Francisco banned these products until the FDA ruled on them and said they're safe. This was prior to all the death and lung injury that we've been seeing sweeping the country.
Yes.
And now Massachusetts as a state has come on board and banned these products statewide, including menthol cigarettes. And so now we're moving towards, and so most of the Northern California cities have done it, and we're moving south. So LA, of course, is our biggest city, and LA in of itself is like a small state. And I grew up partially in Los Angeles. My father lives in Inglewood, so I've constantly been back and forth my whole life. Very, very well aware and have lived through some of the police brutality that we've experienced there in LA. And so that, what the tobacco industry is doing is they're latching on to the legitimate concerns of our people that have to be dealt with. We have to deal with police brutality. And officer involved shootings. And I think that we are making progress as a nation. There's still, we just had this sister in Texas who was shot in her own living room. So we still have a ways to go, but we are moving in that direction. But in the meantime, we can't allow the biggest predator and profiler of Black people, which is Newports. We can't allow them just to keep doing what they've been doing while we deal with these other issues. We have to deal with them simultaneously, and we can deal with them simultaneously, and we must.
Yeah. And also, just to say, again, as I said, we'll get to the criminalization argument that folk are, trying to make around this, and of course referring to what happened to Eric Gardner, and all of that. But let's talk about this ordinance that we are working with here in Los Angeles. We know that the county, made some moves, Carlos, around that. And Latia, you've been, part of this work. As a resident, in South Los Angeles, but also, through Community Coalition, you've attended, the hearings both at the county and at the city. Would you share some perspective around, how, we have to zoom in, on this particular ban of sales, as part of us moving and working towards the vitality of our community?
Right. At the hearing earlier this week, there was a lot of people there concerned about the criminalization part of it. They're thinking they'll be criminalized because of this ban. So I'm glad she said that it's a ban on the sale of it and not the possession of it. So that's really important to put that out there, because there was a lot of people in the community that had a concern about that in connection with police brutality and being criminalized. So that's important to put that out there. But we've been going to meetings with City Council, at City Hall, the hearings, and having the community members come out to voice their concerns about removing the tobacco, alcohol, to eliminate addictions in our community and replacing that with healthier things, markets, yoga studios, replacing that with something, the community wants in their community. Yeah,
it's all about the upliftment and the betterment of our communities. And Carlos, this is, part of, this ban, is just part of the ongoing work that Community Coalition has done in South LA, around, what's been happening with some of our, stores, continuing to sell unhealthy, products. I know I'm working right now, with community health councils, and the two of us connect around a program that we're working on around Healthy Kids Zone at Fremont High School. And there we hear from both students and parents around the proliferation, of, all of these stores, within, close proximity, of that particular school, where sales of these, unhealthy and destructive products, take place. But this is part of just the broad campaign that you've been working on, in South LA. You want to say a little bit about that and how it connects with, this ban of flavored tobacco?
Correct. Thank you. Yes. First of all, I'm an alumni from Fremont High School. So go Pathfinders, make a path, find a path or make one. So we're making one right now. And yes, it's hurtful to go back to my alma mater, to go back to my high school and see how we're still being targeted by corporations, by companies that are just, evil and are just looking out to profit off of addiction and creating a next generation of addiction. And Community Coalition has always looked at listening to the community. So this all started in 2017, as we do every single time from just the beginning of COCO itself, working with Dr. Girls, with LMU, with other folks that can help us to really understand where the community is and what is a highlight that they want to focus on. So 2017, we did a poll with over 5,000 people, residents in South Central LA, Black, brown, young, old, LGBT. We did several focus groups. It was a long process, but we wanted to make sure that we were really listening. And some of the things that were surprising, even though we knew that, liquor stores have always been an issue, dispensaries, once marijuana was legalized, was an issue, all the way to the top was smoke shops. And this was in 2017, so, the whole concept of vaping still wasn't, as high as it is now. But residents were already noticing that this sale of it and the profit of it was creating an overconcentration of smoke shops within our community that were already making sure that they were selling not only the vaping, but additional things, chemicals, and other harmful things that were happening. Also, if they're not regulated and if it's with the doors open 24 hours a day, drive-throughs, it was also creating not only a public health crisis, but a public safety crisis. So the community was feeling it, was seeing it, and they wanted us to really focus on that. And through that collaboration, we were able to co-create a report that made it with a professor from UC Riverside. And that report, we were able to take this on to the county to start the process, to make sure that we really looked at what the consequences were of a corporation that was using our community to keep selling a product that was willing to kill us. And so this overconcentration of smoke shops, we knew that if we regulated, how close or proximity with schools, that was really hard. But if we ban, their profits, which we know 80 or 90% of their sales is through flavored tobacco. And, as we talk about Newport, if you drive through South LA, when we talk about the stressors, we're currently dealing with displacement, gentrification, direct attacks to our communities. So when you look at the signs of freshness and, relax and you'll be fine, it's Newport, right? So when we look at this direct marketing that it's being used today, it's strong. If we go back to Coco, one of our initial campaigns, as she mentioned, Karen has been at the forefront. It was an actual campaign on billboards to make sure that we had billboards in South Central LA that really tackled the harm on the lies that this marketing company was doing, that it wasn't a joyful experience, that you weren't going to look fit with a six-pack and, running around a green park, which we still don't have with the green spaces that we need. But it was just really creating this lie, into our community that through this you will find joy, you will be liberated, you will be happy. And so that was one of our, initial campaigns also with tobacco. So now, years later, we're still pushing. We're still looking at what are the determinants on the lack of health that we have. So through this survey, we looked at three things that we're focusing on. One is making sure that we look at demanding our dollars. We know that there's so much money around South LA. We see the buildings that are being built today. We know that by Culver City, we have the Google companies, we have Amazon. They're creating all these little cities with all the things that you need to have a great quality of life. So it's not that we don't know, and it's not that money's not there. No. We heard that California is one of the richest states in the country. We can be our own country right now. So this idea of there's no money or there's no budget, it's the community has really woken up to say, okay, that's been alive for 30, 40 years. We don't buy it. The other thing is generating justice. We've seen the recent reports, as we mentioned, with specifically Black men being targeted in driving in our streets. So we have the reports, we have the data, we've known this, but now we have that at the forefront. So making sure we use that. And the last one is building a thriving community. Right. We have the data, we have the information, so we know what it takes to turn out and how to create healthy communities, healthy people. We have that. We have the reports from Europe, from other places. We're creating healthy communities outside of the borders of South LA. So this is now, in front of everyone's eyes. So we're looking into this other pillar, which is building thriving communities, to then look at what are the factors, what are the zoning rules, what are the policies that are currently working against our community in South LA. And one of those is providing access to this item that is, addicting our young kids, but also the mental that is still targeting our Black community that is currently being targeted through other, many other layers.
Yeah, and thriving communities, of course, is the key for us in terms of how we need to envision it, and then how we need to mobilize and organize to make sure that we achieve that. And of course, in the midst of all of that, we are dealing with what I call the politics of deception. That we are being deceived, that that's not what we need, that's not what we want. Yet, we have overwhelming evidence that people want to thrive. They want to be part of thriving communities. They want to contribute, to thriving communities. And a politics of deception has no destination but destruction, and that's why we are tackling this huge challenge. Carol, I want to see if I can bring you in again, because when we were at the hearing, this past week, part of the conversation was that we are taking people's rights away. Part of it was that we are limiting choice for people. Can you speak a little about that, in terms of the work that you've done,
I sure
that?
can. And so people need to understand that in 2009, President Barack Obama signed the Tobacco Control Act. And at that time, the FDA was given the authority to regulate the sale of the tobacco industry, the products, but all flavors were taken out of cigarettes except menthol.
Mm-hmm.
So menthol was giving a pass at the beginning. And I liken it to, it would be as if when we passed the seatbelt law and we tell black people, well, you can wear a seatbelt if you feel like it, but if you don't want to, that's your choice. So when a society decides that something is harmful to people and they deal with it, then it needs to be across the board. So people saying, oh, well, I'm not getting my choice. The flavors were taken out, menthol was left in, and at that time, the Congressional Black Caucus put an amendment onto the Tobacco Control Act that the FDA that would have to be their first thing that they needed to do was to look at menthol. And of course, they began to study it, and studying just delays things. So there have been 2 studies that have said that taking menthol off the market would be in the best interest of the public. And the FDA actually did try to do that. And as you know, everything is political. So we're like the political bargaining chip. And the OMB, which has to sign off on everything that the rules that the FDA makes, they redlined all of the things that had to do with menthol. The other products that were left on the market when the FDA took over were all of the cheap little cigars and cigarillos that black and brown people smoke, Swisher Sweets, blunt wrappers, Black and Milds. So these products are cheap. You can buy them individually. They're also linked, of course, to marijuana use, which is now cannabis is now legal. But we don't want our children inhaling nicotine, tobacco into their lungs as long as they can when they're smoking cannabis. And that's what's happening with our young folks. So this, was just super political. So the whole issue of choice was that these products were left on. When the tobacco industry was, with all the predatory tactics that they've actually violated international treaties against racism with their racial profiling of us. They have violated international treaties for the protection of women and children. And when they were giving the free cigarettes out to us in the 60s, we were busy, we were real busy fighting for civil rights. There was a lot of civil unrest. So there was no big pushback as we see as with the vaping. So there's Mothers Against Vaping. There's a strong coalition of middle-class white folks, and it's wonderful, who are protecting their children. And we need to do that the same for our kids. And we need to know that the only way the tobacco industry can stay in business is if they replace, because since they're killing half of the people that use their product, they can't survive if they are not constantly recruiting new people.
Right.
And those new people are our children.
Yeah.
And so even whatever I do as an adult, I want to protect my young people. Yeah. And I'd be willing to be inconvenienced. I'd be willing to have to do something extra to get my fix if that's, if I'm addicted to something, so that my children don't have to go through what I'm going through.
Right.
And there are many smokers that feel that way, but not the ones that the tobacco industry mobilizes to come down. And I feel sorry for them. I love them. I love my people. So all the poor black smokers that were bussed in for that meeting by Reynolds American, RAI, it's just wrong.
Yeah.
It's just wrong.
Yeah, and it was certainly sad to also see, how, several faith leaders were also there, as part of that. And Carol, hopefully we will have time to kind of, talk about just long, history between tobacco companies and civil rights organizations. Speaking of one of those coalitions, we do have one of our partners here in South Los Angeles is an organization called Families Against Flavored Tobacco. And we have Ed Sanders, who is with that organization, on the line, and we're going to bring Ed in just to share some perspective. It was so great to see all of them there with their brightly colored T-shirts and having those young people there. It was just awesome. Ed, are you there?
I am.
Ed, thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about, Families Against Flavored Tobacco? What you guys, are about, and we're so glad that you are part of this broad coalition, as we seek to, push City Council, to move on this ban.
No, certainly. And from my perspective, I had a chance to work with a number of folks around the coalition during the Prop 56 campaign, where we were looking to find a way to generate a revenue source for anti-cessation programs in California by putting a tax on cigarette sales. This coalition, means a lot, and working to help people stop smoking is really a dear passion. I think as growing up in the community, you can all point to someone in the family that smoked. In my case, it was my grandmother and her sister, and I attribute their deaths and their early deaths to the amount of smoking that they did. And in my grandmother and her sister's case, it was menthol cigarettes. And so when this campaign was formed, really led by the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, the Cancer Action Network, Lung Association, Heart Association. This made sense, and this is one of those that you're motivated by a pure passion, because as I've been listening to my colleagues around the horn, this is really about our future, and so much of it is we look to our kids we want to make the world a better place for them, and simply we know that there is a wolf outside the door, and that wolf is the tobacco industry.
Yeah.
This industry has been preying upon our community for years, and that's the troubling aspect of it. I'll be honest. I think the most disheartening part about the hearing this week was watching how easily, not the member from our community, but the members from other communities so readily accepted the exemption of menthol. It was very easy to accept for them, and that troubles me to no end, because I got to tell you, if I see a baby laying in the street with traffic coming onto it, I know that baby's in danger, and I'm going to move to get it. You can't tell me that baby is green, and that if green people say that the baby is okay, that I'm going to just let the baby lay in the street. I'm going to respond to danger, and that's what I think we look for in our leaders. And albeit it was disappointing, I know that the fight will continue, and I'm confident that other members on the city council and certainly in the city of Los Angeles will view it as this coalition views it, and we'll get menthol off the market.
Absolutely. Carol, I really like your website. The website that Carol and them has is www.savingblacklives.org. Is that right, Carol? Did I get it right?
Yes.
Yes.
SavingBlackLives.org.
SavingBlackLives.org. So check out that website, for some more information about this. I want to get back to Latia as a member of Community Coalition, and we know Community Coalition is, of course, member-driven. Why do you think it is important, for us as a community in South LA, in Los Angeles, to work towards, the ban of flavored tobacco?
That's to help our community. There's a lot of addictions, and Community Coalition was founded by Karen Bass and started off with for substance abuse and addictions to help with that. So it's a place where the community can come together to have their voices heard about, the problems in the community. I'm on the Nuisance and Abatement Committee there. So we have meetings to talk with the community members about getting rid of a lot of the problems in the neighborhood and the community, and speaking about what we want to see in our community. Yeah. So it's a place for them to gather to discuss that and make things happen. showing up and speaking to city officials and making it happen.
Yeah. Carlos, can you maybe say a little bit about what the next steps are? I know we were at the health committee hearing this week. What are the next steps? And maybe we can also talk about how we can get people to connect with this broader coalition. And then I'll ask Ed the same question.
Going back to my colleagues in terms of the challenge that's happening right now with the narrative that has been overtaken. And it constantly gets overtaken by those that have the money and the capacity. We look at billboards, we look at commercials, right? Even as nonprofit, when we're trying to do the good thing, who's always taking over our community and our youth through media who have access to it. So we want to make sure that we keep engaging in conversations. I think there's a lot of education that we have to provide. There's a lot of spaces. So, just like right now, if anybody out there that wants to really engage in a conversation, I think we have to really learn. We have to look at the data. We have to look at the videos, the websites, and where are other people getting their information from? I think understanding where the information is coming from, that like understanding is it valid information? Like who's creating this? I think we learned a lot from the last election with number 45 up there, how someone can get elected, or how we can sometimes choose against our own interests because of lies, because of how media is seen, and just some talking points. So we have to make sure that we do the work that is going to protect us and not put us at harm. And so we do want to, open up our space. Community Coalition is right in the middle of South Central LA. We're on 81st and Vermont. So December 12th, December 19, we want to, at 6 p.m., we want to invite any resident that has a question, that wants to engage more, that wants to talk with any of the people that have been here. We have their immediate contacts, information. We want to provide everyone with the tools necessary to continue and engage in this conversation that affects us. I think for way too long, we've been waiting for outside people to talk about us, to figure out what we need, to tell us how we should live our lives. And so we want to make sure that we are engaging in what our healthy community should look like, and to get ready, because this is a battle. It's an ongoing battle. I'm looking at folks that have been in this battle for decades and for years, and so I'm encouraged to be, in support of moving this forward. But also we want to engage new people. We want to engage more people. We need those rooms to be full and filled outside. We should be having buses. We should be having, our own billboards, our own signs. We're talking about people's lives are at stake today. Youth's lives are at stake today. I have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So like, Ed mentioned, any children that are currently at the risk of dying in 20 years or 30 years because of addiction, we should all be out in the streets and protesting and protecting them today. So we want to engage as far as the community residents want to engage. So we're creating the space. If we need to protest, let's protest. If we need to yell, let's yell. If we need to go beyond, radios and TV, let's do this. But I think it's we just want to create the space and the opportunity for people to really engage and protect the next generation. So that's December 12th at 6 p.m., 8101 South Vermont. December 19 at 6 p.m., 8101. And, we'll be sharing some videos. A lot of our colleagues have really good information, some data. And once we have that, let's engage in a really, interesting conversation to look at who is behind all of this dividing us and conquering.
Yes. And the only thing that can beat organized money is organized people. And so that's what Community Coalition, that's what we've been all about, is to see how we can, mobilize and organize people to get to know and understand their power, and through that to see how we can make the necessary progress towards vital communities. Ed, do you want to say a little bit about, what next steps are in terms of families and what you guys are planning?
Appreciate it. Certainly the item has come back out of committee. It will come to the full council probably some point in January. And we're anxious to work with the new council president, Nuri Martinez, who's been a strong advocate for us on this issue. And so, as that comes to the calendar, I think, a lot of the elements that you heard from Carlos come to play. The hearing this past week, tackled a number of different issues. And I think when we start really looking and drilling down, the committee understood how flavored tobacco impacted the vaping phase. What clearly they need more education on, and what I think other members around the horseshoe do get, is the role that flavors play in tobacco smoking in general, and more specifically, the role that menthol as a flavor plays, not just here locally, not just across the nation, but in sort of the global market. The tide is turning on menthol, and the days where members or members of the city council could just sort of sit back and not have to answer or be held to account for their votes is also changing. To Carlos's point, as we organize and we are able to focus more specifically on this issue of menthol, I think as we come back in January, you'll see a very robust chambers that really highlights where our community is and how it feels about being preyed upon.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very significant point here, that the sort of the first of two goals for the LA Family Fighting Flavored Tobacco campaign is in process. Flavored tobacco is going to be banned for the vaping and e-cigarette phase, and I have to stop and just really tip my hat off to those kids that came.
Yes.
I cannot underscore the sacrifices that the school administrators made, that those kids and those parents went through in order to get field trip slips signed and everything organized. That this happened really throughout a Thanksgiving weekend.
Yes.
And those kids were more than excited. They were just the representatives from the Beyond the Bill program, and they're in 84 different schools across LA Unified. So this was not a small representation. Well, let me put it this way: it was a small representation of a larger body of young people.
Mm-hmm.
That committee only heard the argument on vaping, and it looked right past the argument on menthol, and that is where our challenge is. It is to again educate the members of the city council and really drive home the point that menthol is the tobacco industry's number one flavor. They've been using it from the 1950s to target the African American community. They are now using it to target our young people. There is an uptick in smoking among young people, and it's really driven by the menthol flavor.
Mm-hmm.
You see menthol being used in other disparate communities, whether it's the LGBT or Latino community as well. And so you see the same playbook that tobacco plays.
Yeah.
They took that very playbook that they used in menthol and they used it in vaping, and surprised there was an epidemic. I just cannot, for the life of me, understand how the LA City Council, that particular committee, didn't see that, understand that, and move the way they moved to exempt menthol. But I know the challenge is there in front of us. From our standpoint as a campaign, we are much like what Carlos said. We're going to hit the ground running on Monday and organize. It's talking to people. It's building the support. And when this comes back in January, we'll get the rest to see our point.
Absolutely. And again, it's all about building thriving communities and working towards making sure that we do give people an opportunity for a future in terms of that. I want to get back, Carol, to to this whole notion about tobacco and the black community, and just that long-standing partnership, which has been very destructive. And you certainly mentioned that this has been going on through enslavement, and all of that. But also, it seems as if big tobacco continue to have its tentacles in.
They definitely do. And so a wonderful documentary that can be seen on YouTube is called Black Lives, Black Lungs. Mm-hmm. A young brother by the name of Lincoln Monday put it together. It's only 15 minutes. Anybody can just watch it quickly. And it really demonstrates how the tobacco industry just systematically infiltrated almost every African-American organization in this country. This was also documented in Dr. Valerie Yerger and Ruth Malone's seminal paper, Smoking with the Enemy. Mm-hmm. And so things are changing. And so we've had national resolutions passed by the NAACP and Delta Sigma Theta sorority. The Deltas were the first national organization of that stature to pass a national resolution supporting getting menthol off the market, supporting local action since the FDA has just not done anything about this issue, And we know that tobacco control is it's really a local issue. So the way things work is that you have to go down and you have to face your city council people. You have to face Curran Price, who wanted the exemption for menthol. And so he has to face his constituents. And so it's not over. But the tobacco industry, and particularly Reynolds American Incorporated, which is RAI. So oftentimes people won't even realize that it's tobacco that's sponsoring something. So we want people to be on the lookout for RAI. And as we have been more successful, they have just come out of the woodwork in terms of engaging Black lobbyists and groups to come out against this and to say that we're harming our community. So, I've looked at the Eric Gardner tape many times in my work. I talk about him in my presentations. And, of course, it's heartbreaking. And when his mother and also the mother of Trayvon, Mothers of the Movement, have a letter about their concern about doing anything that's going to call attention and make us have increased police interactions. But I just want to throw out a few names here because it's, Eric Gardner was not killed because he was selling loose cigarettes. He was killed by out of control New York City police officers who assaulted him, threw him to the ground, and basically choked him to death. He had some respiratory issues. But we also had a very, very famous case in New York was the brother Amadou Diallo, who was from Guinea, who was just standing on his stoop when undercover police officers shot him over 40 times, including in the soles of his feet when he fell backwards. I interviewed his mother at the time. So when you talk to these mothers who've lost their children, it's very painful. But it's disgraceful that the tobacco industry, who kills more Black people than anything else put together, that they're going to come now and defend us and help us. It's just ridiculous. But we lost the sister Tatiana Jefferson and Bothon Jean, both who were sitting in their own homes and were killed by police. Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, who was killed because he was selling CDs with the permission of the store owner. Philando Castile, Sandra Blonde, killed when they're driving. My sweet Trayvon, who's now back in the news with the Zimmerman, suing the parents, pouring salt in the wounds. And then in the Bay Area, Oscar Grant, who was killed trying to ride BART to be safe and not drive on New Year's Eve. So those are some of the heartbreaking examples of our losses that we face. So this is a legitimate concern, but leaving these deadly products on the market and accessible to our people is not the solution to deal with police brutality. And it's kind of, we were having the conversation with our boys, if the police stop you, put your hands on the wheel, don't move fast. And so, now with social media, we saw in real time what happened to Philando Castile. So it's not just a problem of manners and respecting the police. It's a matter of, police who do these things, they have to be, there are ways we can have tests for people to see if they're bullies, if they're racist, and they need to be gone from the departments. We also have a lot of former law enforcement. NOBLE, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, they are being paid by Reynolds American to go around and say of these unintended consequences. And so as former police officers, I throw that back on them. They know better than anyone how to deal with the police departments and how to clean up. And they've seen firsthand some of the things that have gone on over the years with our people in the police department. So that they should focus their energy on that and not on keeping these deadly products that are more lethal than guns and bullets, keeping them on the market. We're all tied. We all have many things to do. So focus on your area of expertise, which is going back to these police departments and helping them to implement the changes that they need to make in order to ensure that these things stop happening and we stop having these officer-involved killings and profiling and the things that have gone on with our Black and brown communities. And then I just want to say, there's hope here. We have groups. We want our city council to sponsor help organizations like Simply Wholesome. And there's a vegan restaurant in Inglewood, The Stuff You Eat. Yes. Hot Food Cafe. We have the African Coalition that's doing wonderful work around tobacco control under the leadership of Sanai Amasu and Nicole Turkson. So now that we passed this tax that Ed talked about, there are many resources that are being laid out as we speak, and we're addressing the issues of tobacco control from a point of view. They're addressing the social determinants of health.
Yes.
So as it's not about we're weak and that we smoke and we do all these things. There's a reason why we do the things that we do. And a lot of it is because of the systematic racism, because of stress. And so we're using tobacco tax dollars to address those issues so that we have healthier communities where people are thriving, and for people of God to think that people can't stop smoking. That's to me, that's saying you don't even believe in God, because we can change, and we can bring in all the things that we need to, the forces to help our communities to thrive and to be healthy and not hold on to something that's killing us.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, one thing that needs to be said, is that, I mean, smoking is suicide in slow motion. I mean, let's just be clear about it. There's nothing, positive about it.
Nothing positive.
Yeah. So we want to just go around as we come to a close and just give our guests just an opportunity to say some final words. As we close out. So I'm gonna invite Latia. What else would you like to say, Latia? As we continue this fight, we closing this conversation, but we continue to fight. Around it. Any final words from you?
Just for the community to come out and support and have their voices heard. Like Carlos said earlier, we have a meeting on December 12th with the Nuisance and Abatement Committee. So we need the support of the community to have their voices heard with what they want in their community. So know that they have that support there to get their voices heard.
And they have the power to be able to make that difference too, yes.
I want to say that, our community, South Central, is so resilient, it's so beautiful. There's so much magic, there's so much power, so much hope. And I'm looking at this renaissance today. I'm looking at young people, everyone getting together, creating alliances, black and brown, coming together and looking at the context and how we can really embark and protect one another and really step up for one another. So, shout out to South LA Cafe that just opened up right now today. They're doing their grand opening on 39 and Western, so there is this Hank's Market, there's all these black, owned places that are now saying we don't need this tobacco, we don't need a lot of this liquor, we're providing healthier outcomes so that we can have the future that we want. So it's happening today. People aren't aware of the renaissance that's happening in South Central LA. We're right literally a block from Destination Crenshaw, it's happening. So it's all hands on board. Let's really, keep pushing forward, protect our people, and just keep filling out with hope and love. We got this.
Yes. Yeah. South LA is the future. Ed, you have any final words for us?
I do. LA Families Fighting Flavored Tobacco is still fighting for the health of our community. As we enter the holiday season, and we all have a chance to sort of reflect on the year and the possibility of the year to come. You gather with your families. I hope that all take a moment and really sort of think about the type of city that we want to live in. We are building a region, and we're doing it city by city that says that flavored tobacco is a bad outcome for the future of our kids. And so when we have the ability to connect with people this holiday season, ask them to take a moment, go on the fightflavoredtobaccola.org website and the Take Action tab. Punch in your name and send a letter to your local city councilman and really stress that you want to see this product off the market. I can't wait to re-engage with my colleagues around the horn here because this is going to be an important issue in 2020, and I look forward to removing this product from the market. So thank you for having me on this afternoon.
Great, thanks, Ed. Really appreciate it. Kel, any final words from you, and then I'll close us out.
I just want to ditto what Carlos said, that this is a new day and that we can have healthy communities, we can make money and do good things, that we can have wonderful places and have beautiful communities. And so we're all in for that. And we also have another project that's Amplified. The website is amplified.love, and there we actually can help sometimes with community events. So I'd love to talk to you, Carlos, some more about doing some sweet spoken word in Los Angeles and support our local businesses. And we have a Stop Smoking page on our website where we really will be giving support to people. We have Dr. Karen Beard, who's our cessation expert, and we're going to be really amping up the love, amping up Black boys reading on grade level by third grade, amping up that Black folks are going to stop smoking and the good and positive things. So we're looking forward to 2020.
Yes.
And we're going to rock it. Whatever happens, we're going to make it right for our community.
Right.
Yes. I want to say, don't forget Hilltop Cafe.
No, that's right. There's so much more. Yeah, I didn't mention everything. There's a lot happening in 2020. Here we go.
There's a renaissance for vitality that's taking place, here in South LA. And again, today, our purpose was to see how we can engage in education and mobilization around the challenge of flavored tobacco and the work that this entire coalition is doing. The depth and breadth of this coalition is just extraordinary. In terms of our local folk here through Community Coalition, as well as, Families Against Flavored Tobacco, and, the work that we're doing through the Community Health Councils and the Healthy Kids Zone, work that we're doing in Southeast LA, as well as at Fremont High School, and just working with the parents, with the students, and with the staff, and with those community leaders. It's just extraordinary. In the work that we seek to do. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak at a prayer breakfast at Peace Chapel Church, a men's prayer breakfast in South Los Angeles, and gathered there with several men. It was a very, very powerful experience. And I want to lift up the scripture that I used yesterday by way of just closing, not really closing us out, but by way of really continuing to inspire us to engage and to mobilize, around us. It's Jeremiah 29, verse 11. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, and plans to give you a hope and a future." This is why we do the work that we are doing here at Faith Without Borders with all of our partners to make sure that South LA, the greater Los Angeles area, California, the United States, and indeed everyone around the world know that they can have a hope or a future filled with hope. That's what it's about. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank Carol McGruder joining us. Thank you so much, Carol. Ed Sanders joining us, as well as Latia Suttle right here in the studio, and Carlos Leon. Thank you so much for making today, again, once a powerful experience around Faith Without Borders. It is about how we educate ourselves and how we, through that education, engage in mobilization, coming together, holding hands, and work for a thriving community. That's what it's all about. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Pastor Calvin Sauls. This has been Faith Without Borders.